and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 63, the Silhouette Challenge. So, last week in the podcast, and you can go back and find episode 62 on YouTube or scroll back further on Facebook if you're watching from here, I talked about the notion of silhouettes and how they differ from shadows. Primarily in the fact that it is the silhouette is the subject itself, whereas the shadow is cast from the subject. But it's that notion of the light being behind the silhouette, behind the subject, that creates the silhouette. So you can see the outline, but you can't see the detail of the thing. So that kind of changes very much how you view it. And it's quite an interesting thing with photography. We very rarely see silhouettes with our own eyes, because our eyes actually, when we look at the object that's in silhouette, our eyes adjust to see the detail, but a photograph doesn't allow us to do that. So it's quite a sort of fascinating aspect of photography. So having chatted about all that last week, I set the challenge for this week, and we've had about, I think, 17 or 18 people put in images. So what we're going to do this evening is go through the images, look at what people have submitted, and see how different interpretations on this idea of silhouette can be taken, and hopefully inspire each other to go out and do some more interesting images ourselves. So that's what's coming up tonight. Excuse me. As usual, here I am live on Facebook. So if you're watching live, leave me a comment. Let me know you're here, let me know where you're from, and I will periodically keep looking in at the comments. So if there's things you want to chat about, things you want to ask, things you want to comment on, then leave the comment. If you are watching in one or two other different places on Facebook, the best place to leave the comment is to go to my Kim Ayres photography page, at Kim Ayres Photography, which you can just sort of see over on the left there. And if you comment on where the video is appearing there, I should be able to see the comments appear on my screen. Now there is another thing, which is I'm running approximately 10 to 15 seconds ahead of you watching it. So you might type a comment and then it could be a little bit of time before I actually see it. With that in mind, yes, so hello, welcome, and let's see, I can see we've already got some comments coming in. So right, oh, my wife says hello everyone. Russ says evening here, and hi everyone from a warm and sunny South Gloucestershire. Jim says hi Kim and Maggie from Dumfries. Jackie from South Africa is saying evening all. Kazia says hello. Doriana says hello. Robert says howdy from Texas. Jackie says, oh, it's raining in South Africa. Roy says hello everyone from West Yorkshire. Fiji's here from India. Nuria says hello everyone. Morven says hello from Dumfries. Ben says, anyone else here, or am I in the wrong place? Hopefully you're in the right place. Just scroll down through the comments, Ben. And Brian says, hi all, watching in from Burhead on the Murray coast. Visiting my grandchildren for the first time in 18 months. Oh, how wonderful. Now, there's a lot of that kind of final catching up. Just over a week ago, coming up to 2 weeks ago, I caught up with my father for the first time since, again, similar kind of 18 months to 2 years. Very emotional reunion. So that's rather lovely. So I'm now starting to see quite a few people catching up with relatives and friends and what have you, and it's really warming. Let's hope that we can carry on doing this and there aren't new strains that come out that kind of prevent things. But yeah, now the vaccines are starting to roll out for more people. There's more reunions are possible, which is a lovely thing. Oh, Rosie's here from Whithorn, says hello everyone. Sorry I'm a bit late, was distracted by Ronan Keating. Not entirely sure how to respond to that one. Right, just for anybody who, if you have to rush off early, or if you are watching this on YouTube, understand I record each of these podcasts on YouTube, and if you go to youtube.com/Kim Ayres, you can find all the back episodes, whether you want to go back to episode 62 and revisit what I was talking about more in depth about silhouettes, or whether you want to visit any of the other previous 61 episodes before that, you can. Finally, for the intro part, if you would like to support these podcasts, if you find them useful, interesting, entertaining, you learn something from them, and you just want to kind of help them along, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is the place to do it. So, with all that in mind, let's get started. Like I say, we have something in the region of about 17 or 18 different people have put in photos. And so what we will start with is Ben, I think. So Ben Craven sent in this message, said, along with this picture, at this time of year in Scotland, it's hard to find outdoor silhouette opportunities that coincide with my waking hours. So I set up something indoors. My photo was inspired by the ambiguous face vase image. It's me and my partner Helen. I wanted the vase aspect here not to be too dominant. Helen's hair helps here. I wanted a hint of romance without being soppy, and I tweaked the light curve so there's a hint of detail in the silhouettes. The vase aspect gets clearer if you view it from a distance. When it suggests a sort of turned brass candlestick, that's a bit wonky, having been dropped to the ground one too many times. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with it. Next time round, I'd put a background, a bedsheet hung in the front of the window at a greater distance so I could get it out of focus, but that would require a lot of furniture moving. And I cropped the photo much more tightly than I anticipated and only just have enough pixels left. Moral, shoot in the highest resolution just in case. Well, I suppose it's that bit where I'm always saying, give it a little bit of space to breathe, or shoot from wider out so you have more space to crop in on. So yeah, this is a classic idea. I mean, there's traditionally that vase silhouette faces idea whereby, depending on where the strength of what you're looking at is, if you sort of screw up your eyes slightly and concentrate on the lighter patch, it does kind of look a bit more like a kind of wonky candlestick that's been dropped and bent, because the faces are not completely symmetrical. Ben hasn't reversed his own face; he's used his partner Helen's face as the other side of it. I like the fact that I can see the warmth of the smiles as well. You're obviously having fun with this. What I would say is, actually, in the editing, you could, whilst you're talking about the fact the problem is the sheet isn't far enough out of the way to be able to focus. If we just briefly open this in Photoshop, a little thing you could do with just the levels would make a little bit of difference with this. So if I just take this here and I go to the levels, and if we take the slider that's down in the bottom right corner is where I've got them, if we take that and we move this to the left, you can see it makes the lighter part brighter. And so we can do that. Now, it has also brightened up the contours of the face as well. So if we take the bit over on the left, the darks, and we drag them over to the right, we can in turn make that dark. We can take that down to almost complete silhouette, so you can't make out any of the details apart from a little bit in the hair there. And if you wanted, and say you didn't want to have the colour, then at that point you just need to put in a gradient map or straightforwardly desaturate, and then you've got a kind of complete black and white silhouette idea. So, but really, it was just a case of pointing out with that, Ben, that if you play around with the levels, you can brighten up that background, and at that point, the fact that there's a sheet that was still in focus that you didn't want there disappears, and it's no longer about that. It enables you to isolate the parts of it that you're most interested in. So thanks for sending that one in, Ben. I thought that was a really good sort of start to this, because there is that classic picture, which you can look up now. What did you say? It's the Rubin vase, Rubin. If you Google that or look it up on Wikipedia, it's that classic thing whereby you have a shape, which looks like two faces when you look at it one way, or it looks like a vase or a candlestick in another way. So that's a lovely part of silhouette, and it brings home that whole idea of, with silhouette, where your brain is almost constantly leaping between foreground and background, and it's the relationship between foreground and background becomes incredibly important with silhouettes. So yes, thank you for sending that one in, Ben. Right. So where are we? All right, yeah, a little bit of problem there where Ben had said he couldn't see the comments. Russ has come in and said, "Hi Ben, I had to refresh to see other people's comments." And so, I mean, we've got several comments in. So if you can't see them, then do just refresh, and hopefully they should appear. Right, okay, I'm getting slightly distracted again as last week Facebook changed their settings again, so it swapped around, which basically means I can, if I'm trying to read the comments at the same time, I have the little video of me chatting away in the corner 10 seconds behind me, which is really rather strange. So I gesture my hands like that, nothing happens on the screen until about 10 seconds later when suddenly the gesture happens. Yeah, so I'm waiting for the gesture to appear. So it's just too distracting. Oh, the gesture just appeared. That's how much of a time lag there is. Okay, so with that in mind, let's move on. Okay, so Ben said, yes, I see, thanks. And VG said, the edit brought out the vase effect more. Okay, so let's move on to the next picture then, which Benedito sent in. And Benedito said, blue hour is my favourite light. Now, for those who aren't sure, you may well know the golden hour. The golden hour is generally speaking, the hour before sunset and the hour after sunrise, when the sun is very low in the sky and it casts much more of a kind of golden light to things. The blue hour is the hour after sunset or the hour before sunrise, when there's light in the sky but the sun isn't there. And it creates a very bluish effect, but there's still light around, and you just quite often get that afterglow from the sunset or that pre-dawn glow as well if you're at the other end of it. So Benedito was playing around with that. He says it's one of his favourite kinds of lights because you get such wonderful colours painted in the sky. Balancing long exposures and f-stops while keeping the ISO fairly low to keep the noise down is itself an art. So it's a place you can kind of really challenge yourself with the settings on your camera. So what he did was he sent in this one and said, here's a shot of people admiring the sky at the end of Bognor Regis Pier. So he said this is a cropped version, as it changes the main subject from the sky to the pier and people. The second image now, I'll just show you that second image. So that's his kind of original one. What did he say? Yes, the second image I posted is to show how the full image, the sky, becomes much more dominant. And it's true, actually. If you look at that larger one, you sort of have a sense of the picture being about the sky and the landscape, and the people are slightly kind of a little bit more incidental in it. Whereas when you just crop in a little bit, then it becomes a bit more about the people and the background together. So always worth remembering that when you're playing around with the crop, as to, you know, where the balance is, where the story is, and what you're trying to emphasize. Are you trying to emphasize the space that's happening, or are you trying to emphasize the subjects that are within that space? So thanks for sending that one in, Ben. I thought that was quite fun. Yeah, get out there. You know, if you're going out there, it's great. Take photos against the sunset, but also just after the sun has set, there's quite a lot of possibilities to explore there as well. So thanks for sending that one in, Benedito. Right. Oh, Russ says beautiful colours in the sky. So next up then, we want to go to Brian. Now, Brian took his photo over at Claverick Castle. And he was looking up at the tower at the top. It says, when I was on a trip to Claverick Castle, I saw this heron standing on top of one of the towers. And it amazes me to the fact that some people only see things at eye levels. Lots to see above head height, especially in architecture. And that's so true, Brian. Just to be able to see a heron sitting up there, silhouetted beautifully against the sky, that's great. I can't help but feel crop-wise, I would have liked to have... It feels like it's sort of come off like you cropped a little bit too close in here. I can't help but feel that either you wanted to have the same kind of space on the other side of the top of the tower that you do on the right, or you needed to crop the right in to match the left, and if you sort of did something a little bit more like that, that could be interesting, although less sense that it's actually a tower. So, yeah, so perhaps really it's more a case of just kind of catching the other side of it as well. And then I think you either get the, or even you kind of, I suppose you could go kind of half tower in a way or something, but it just kind of feels like being this close to the edge and not having the edge of it kind of makes you feel like it's just missing. You either need it cropped further in so that you're not worrying about it, you're just aware you've got the top of the tower, or you need it taken further out so you can see the actual edge of it. But that aside, I think, yeah, I think it's a really important point you make there, Brian, about the need to look up. It's one of those things I'm always aware of when I go into certain towns and cities, that we tend, it's like we look at the shop fronts and we're used to this idea that where the sign is above the door or above the window, it creates a kind of artificial barrier, so you very rarely look further up, and yet there's a huge amount of really interesting buildings. And in the case of Dumfries, a lot of really interesting plant life. There's a lot of old buildings that haven't been taken much care of, and if you look up, you can see all sorts of small trees, as well as various ferns and plants growing out of the chimneys, the cracks in the walls, the guttering, almost the hanging gardens of Dumfries if you happen to look up. But yeah, so there's always, it's always worth looking up. Always, and of course, when you're looking up, you've got brighter sky at the background. Lots of silhouette opportunities for that as well. So yeah, thanks for that one, Brian. Interesting points you make. Cliff says the crop works as it keeps the gradient of the sky. Okay, right. So Cliff's comment is about Benedito's. This is going to confuse me because I'm so far ahead. By the time I check the comments are going to be probably referring to the picture before. Meanwhile, VG does say Heron is razor focused. Love the silhouette of the bird. Well, similarly, another kind of looking up silhouette of a bird is Cliff. Cliff sent this one, sorry, not that one, no, this one, in of a gull, which I really do rather like. There's a lot of texture in the sky. You've got these lovely kind of heavy, moody clouds, and then you've got that silhouette of the lone bird against it. Cliff says, I was out for an evening stroll tonight on the seafront and noticed a thin strip of light between the clouds and the promenade wall. I quickly adjusted my settings to expose for the sky, then dialed down a bit further and focused on the evil-looking seagull. Is it a particularly evil-looking seagull? Are all seagulls evil? If you happen to live in a sort of seaside resort, you do get the idea, or not even seaside. I mean, there's certain resorts where you get a lot of seagulls. They can really be quite evil, constantly swooping down, pecking food out your hand, bag of chips, or fries, as they're known on the other side of the Atlantic. It's such a problem with seagulls. So yes, it is quite easy to see them all as evil. However, with this one, kind of pondering how he's going to make the world a more terrible place. So anyway, Cliff goes on, as always, I shoot in RAW. The details were recoverable, but this image was pretty much completely silhouette straight out of the camera, so minimal editing other than black and white was used to get the final result. I would normally have composed this a bit more centrally, but I think the rule of thirds works well here. And I think you're right, actually. And because the seagull is looking off to the left, then what you've done is you've given it that little bit of extra space to the left, which I think works better. If you'd actually had this kind of completely central, then it would have felt like there was probably too much space to the right. I think when you have a creature or a person looking in a particular direction, 9 times out of 10 you want to give extra space into the photo to sort of give you a sense of that looking into something. Same with movement. If somebody's riding a bike or driving a car, you want to have more space in front of it than you do behind it. There are exceptions to that, of course, but as a kind of rough rule of thumb, if you're not sure, do it that way. You'll probably find, like I say, 9 times out of 10, it works best. So yeah, nice one, that's Cliff. I think that's good moody sky behind it, and that, yeah, having it sort of off center certainly works better. Right. Okay. Oh, John's here from Columbus, Ohio, on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. Glad you could make it, John. Maggie says, loves the sky. Russ says, good Alfred Hitchcock shot there, Cliff. That's reference to Hitchcock's film The Birds. Jackie says, nice and eerie. Jim says, sky behind the seagull adds to the atmosphere of the photo, and it absolutely does. So next up, we have Doriana. And she says, I was trying to take some outdoor pictures, but unsuccessful with the rain and lightning. So I submitted this one I took last summer. No editing was done. So what's really nice here is you've got the sunset, and the sunset behind the trees gives this great horizon line, really, which is all about the silhouette of the trees. There's also a little kind of streak or sunbeams kind of coming up through the cloud, from behind, creating this sort of V shape within it. Now, what I would say with this, Doriana, is that actually I think the real story here is that horizon line. Once you get sort of above probably this bit of cloud, there's nothing really else adding to it. And similarly, once you get sort of below about half that sense of the shadow, that's not really adding to it either. So with this, I would be very tempted just to kind of crop it in a bit. Quite simply, if we take this and drop that down to, like I say, roughly round about where that cloud is, and then pull this up to about halfway-ish, maybe even a little bit more, something like that, and then crop it. And I think immediately we end up with a sort of a slightly better crop, because this is where the story is. This is what the photo is really about. And then something as simple as a little curves adjustment. We take the curves and I just grab it down to darken everything a little bit. Something like this. It just makes the darks darker while leaving some of the light in there. Then it sort of makes a little bit more dramatic with the clouds of the sky. The contrast, I think, comes up a little bit more with this wonderful inverted sunbeam, the light kind of coming up out of it. So you can see just the difference between that and that, or between history, our original photo, the original photo like that, or the cropped in version. So just wanted to take that idea with you, Doriana, that when you've got the photo, think about where the story is, what's the key interesting part of that photo. And once you identify that, then can you crop it to emphasize that story? One of the things I talk about a lot, regulars will have heard me say this many times, and no doubt I will say it many, many times again, is that whatever photo you've got, there is something about it, there is some kind of narrative that you are trying to explore or express, whether it's a mood, a feeling, something about a contrast in a line, light, mix between one part of the photo and another. But whatever it is, there's something about that photo that caused you to bring your camera out and take it. Once you identify what that is, then every other aspect of that photo is either contributing to or detracting from the purpose of that photo. And in this case, I think the real story was about what was happening on that horizon line. It was the light behind the trees. You need just enough shadow to be below it to know that, yes, okay, this is sort of silhouetted, but you don't need much. And you need just enough sky to be able to know that the sunlight and getting that lovely beam into it. Beyond that, it's then diluting, I think, the picture that you were doing. So just cropping, a simple cropping in, and then a little bit of curves to darken to emphasize the sort of the drama, the contrast between the light and the dark, I think really helps that. So thank you for sending that one in. Right, where are we? Oh, Maggie says, I like the silhouetted tree line underneath the cloud line. Rosie says, the curve adjustments really makes the sunbeam pop. Russ says, not sure why, but I keep having to refresh the comments. Have to keep refreshing to bring up the comments. Oh, that's a pain, Russ. I've got no idea why that would be. I don't know whether Facebook's changed something or whether it's just the app you're playing or you're watching through. Sorry, I'm afraid I don't have any further suggestions on that one. VG says, the cropping helps, the edit makes it amazing. The trees are beautiful. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, Doriana says, thank you so much. I can't wait to play around with the picture. Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's good to know. And Nuria says, same here. I think she's also having problems with needing to refresh in order to see the latest comments. So I don't know whether you're all having that problem or whether Facebook's changed something. Okay, but I will read you the comments as they appear here. If you are... Oh, Rosie says she has to keep refreshing too, so it's obviously a kind of Facebook-wide problem. If you are watching this on YouTube, then you can leave comments there as well. I do usually get notified. Occasionally I don't, or it turns up late. But yeah, feel free to leave comments. If there's something you find interesting or whatever, then yeah, leave a comment. You can do that too. And then it's there for anybody else who's watching the podcast at a later date as well. Okay, Ben says he's also getting that problem with the comments, as is Jim. But VG says she's getting the comments all right. So, Michelle's arrived. Hello, Michelle. Glad you could make it. And if you're struggling with the comments, the current thing we're talking about is the fact that you might need to keep refreshing the page in order to see the latest comments. Right, okay, so where are we next then? Robert, I think, is next. No, not Robert, Inga. Where are we? No, Inga, sorry, right, find that, yes. So, Inga was saying, difficult to get the details in the squirrel as crisp and sharp as I wanted to, so I decided to make it a silhouette in black and white to enhance the alert mood, cropped to adjust the composition and the framing. So yeah, I love this piece. Really, you can the fluff on the ears of the squirrel is lovely, and I like the fact that it's sort of echoed in to me it feels like there's an echo in the pine needles as well. These little sharp lines sort of just jutting out. It's not like a smooth deciduous tree, and it's not like smooth fur on another animal's ears or something like that. You've got this kind of spikiness going on at the same time, and I think that's a nice idea. So it gives you this other option as well. So Inga took the photo of the squirrel. Actually, the details on the squirrel itself weren't that brilliant, and she wasn't able to sort of rescue it in a way that she felt that she really liked. But the way around that, to rather than just dismiss the photo, she's then darkened down everything to make the silhouette happen. And then it becomes, rather than it being about the detail of the squirrel, as like the expression on the face or the fur at the front, it's about the outline, it's about the fluffiness of the fur. And I think that's a really good thing to, it's one of those things when sometimes we have photos, we like the photos, we know there's something in the photo, but it's not working in the way we want it to. And it's too late to go back and take another version of it. But sometimes one of those editing tricks, then it becomes silhouettes. Rather like moving into black and white can quite often change something if the colour balance isn't right. So going black and white and silhouette gives you new options to play around with a photo that maybe you never set out to do, but it certainly maybe potentially gives life to a photo that might otherwise have just ended up in the delete real recycling bin. So thanks for sending that one, Inga. That's fun. That right. I think Where are we? Okay, so Robert says you got me. Maggie says really like the textural difference here. VG says the squirrel is kind of looking spooked. It looks so beautiful and feel like touching those sharp furry ears. Russ says lovely photo, great capture. The squirrel and the tree work really well. Not sure if I find the post to the left slightly distracting. Yeah, I think that's one of those things. Okay, actually, let's tell you what. Let's flick back and just have a quick thought about that. How does anybody else feel about that post on the left? I think it can be read in a couple of different ways. It is because it is a very kind of bold, solid line, as opposed to the sort of fluffiness of the ears or the spikiness of the tree. You're right. It does kind of feel fairly dominant. At the same time, it also helps frame the picture somewhat as well. Sort of curves the eye back in on itself. So would it have worked perhaps if you removed it? Well, I'll tell you, actually, let's do that. Let's just see what happens if, let's do a straightforward comparison shot. Let's pull this in here so everybody can kind of see that. If I just duplicate that layer for a moment, and let's just very quickly take the spot healing tool and remove that and see what happens. Does that improve the photo? Perhaps. It feels a little bit empty on the left, but is that just because I've been thinking? Maybe if the other option then is to just remove the post, but actually leave part of that tree there. So you do something along that line. I'm not sure actually whether that necessarily makes it any better. It does change the mood and feel of it though, doesn't it? So I think it's one of those things whereby it becomes a case of the personal preference. Do you want it without the tree? Do you want it with the edge of the tree but without the branch? Or do you want it with the full branch? And therein you kind of come across your personal aesthetic taste. Actually, for my taste, probably then more like that. But then maybe what we would actually do is pull this down a little bit as well, make it slightly more kind of cinematic in its, yeah, actually maybe even a little bit lower. I quite like that. That kind of does it for me. But it's that fun thing, it's that great thing with photography. I mean, I've done this. Some people might prefer it, but some will prefer the other versions as well. So, but I think what you have to do is play around until you find the one that appeals to you, because the more you pursue what works for you, the better. The more you'd start to develop your voice in photography. Interestingly, when the challenge went out last week, I think pretty much the first 4 or 5 people who submitted an image submitted 2 images and said, oh, I like both of these, I couldn't decide which one. And I had to come back in and write, sorry, you got to pick one. Picking one is really important. And it would be very easy to submit 2 images and say, hey Kim, pick one, which do you prefer? And fine, I could pick the one that I prefer, but that's not necessarily the one that you prefer. And I think as part of developing yourself as a photographer, learning to allow yourself to enjoy or to hone the image that you want. Slightly different if you are doing the photograph for somebody else. If the photo is for somebody else, then and they are paying you for it, or you are getting some kind of reward for it, then you need to take their taste into consideration, and perhaps giving them 2 or 3 different options and saying which do you prefer. That's fine. That's okay. That because then that photo is for somebody else. But if it's for your portfolio, if it's for developing your photography for your fun, then it's really important that you make the choice. And if you have 2 very similar photos and you can't decide, you have to try and plump for one. And if you're not sure which one, the classic thing is flip a coin, and as the coin is flying in the air and you catch it, and there will be part of you half wishing that it comes down on heads or tails, and that sometimes helps you make that decision as to which one to go for. So that, I think that's a bit of a tangent, but well, that's not that much of a tangent. I think it's a kind of just a really important point on photography. So thanks for sending that one in, Inga, and thank you too, Russ, for pointing that out, because it's sort of, I think it's led us off on a kind of a slightly interesting line of thought there. So where are we at? Okay, we've got a few comments about the with the post. That's great. So yes, okay. So Ben also thought he found the post distracting. Robert says the diagonal follows the squirrel's back. John said he would remove the post. Nuria would remove it. Robert felt without it, it's not as balanced. Roy says he liked it better without the post. Ben, better without the post, like the extra space. VG thought, no, if we remove the post, it looks empty. Similar tree might look better balanced. Michelle prefers it without. Robert's suggesting trying reversing the image. VG says the cropping looks good. Russ likes the squirrel, thinks the squirrel looks less trapped without the post. Maggie says, with the post removed, it allows the squirrel space to breathe. Jim says, I like the cinematic crop. And Ben says, if you find it hard to decide between two pictures, it means that if you make the wrong choice, it can't be very wrong. Well, that's a good point. So don't worry too much about getting the right decision. Okay, well, that's really interesting. And it kind of reflects on what I was saying, to that extent that ask different people, some people preferred the post there, some people preferred it without. So yeah, work on your idea of whether that works. So yeah, thanks for that. Oh, Jackie says having to choose an image makes one inspect your images more. This is true, and interestingly, because Jackie was one of these where I forced her to make a choice. So let's flick over to Jackie. So this is Jackie's image. Jackie says, I took 2 images in a studio setup with a master and slave speed light pointing directly to a white screen at the background. This was a vinyl backdrop. I added the top hat and flowers. Now, you can't see the flower because the flower was in a second picture, which she decided not to use. But added as a point of interest, and in the post-processing converted them to black and white. Now, in the other photo, she put a picture of a flower into the background and had the silhouette, well, not this silhouette, but a similar silhouette over the top of it. And then said which one to choose. And I said, well, choose one. And in the end, she's gone for the one without the flower in the background. Now, personally, I think it works better not having the busy background. And in the end, she decided pretty much the same. She chose this one as it emphasised the silhouette more. The other one had a background which was just a bit too busy. And I think that's kind of... Now, this is... I like this silhouette, Jackie. I think what you've done here is you've got... we've got the face, and the face is framed by the arms and the hat. You've got this nice kind of circular thing going on. So so that the outer arms become almost like a kind of barrier, so your eye doesn't fall out of the photo, it gets brought back in again. The completely side-on face allows the ponytail and the shape of the face to sort of come in with little bits of hair as well. I think if you had another texture on the back of that would detract and take away from the shapes that you were going for here. So yeah, that completely black on white background, it's all about the shape. If you shoved in a different kind of background, then the background is then competing with these shapes, I would say. So yeah, I think that's probably the key thing that I want to say on that. So thanks for sending that one in, Jackie. Right. Russ says that he'd seen the one with the flower behind, and while he liked them both, this one is cleaner and more dramatic. yes, for those of you who are watching this tonight live or tomorrow, if you go back into the Facebook group Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, you can scroll down and find Jackie's other entry. Morven says she loves the pic with the hat. Jackie says thanks, Kim. So yes, for anybody who is either sort of watching, who's not aware, then I have a Facebook group, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. Just type that into Facebook, you will find the group. Come join. This is the place where you can submit images. This week is a challenge week where we are looking at the photos put into the Silhouette Challenge. I do a challenge roughly about once a month, every 4 to 5 weeks or so. And in between times, we have critique section where you can put photos in specifically designed to get feedback. So make sure if you're interested in getting feedback on your images, if you've got particular sticking points, if you've got any kind of questions at all, put them into the Facebook group and I will do my best to help. Right, okay. On VG says, lovely silhouette. So there we go. Right, next up then, let's turn to Jim. So Jim sent this one. Interestingly, Jim sent 2 photos, and this one had a blue background and the other one had a very kind of reddish pink background. And again, there was a little bit of debate and I said, well, choose one, and this was the one that Jim chose. So Jim says, hi Kim, I took this photo of a Ferris wheel in Barcelona a couple of years ago. And he couldn't decide whether to go for the blue or the kind of orange. Well, he says orange. It looks slightly more pink to me, but maybe that's the screens. But okay, we'll go with orange. The orange was created by using a filter overlay and the blue was using a gradient map, both after converting to black and white. So what he did was he converted it to black and white and then added the colour afterwards. The photo was cropped before editing to bring out the Ferris wheel. Any critique would be appreciated. And so anyway, I said, well, look, are you going to go for the, which one do you want to choose? And it says, after looking at them again, I prefer the blue one. It seems to be more realistic and appealing to the eye, and would even consider printing to frame. So I thought that was interesting, that essentially being forced to reflect made him think again and gain a new appreciation of the photo that he's got. So yeah, the shapes are really beautiful. I mean, I think here, this is, I don't know what your original picture looked like, but if we think of comparing that to the photo that we edited for Doriana, this is a case of where you've got enough dark at the bottom to know that there's something going on, but you haven't had to overdo it, so that all the action is we've got all that action hanging in the middle, which is where we want it. There's just enough sky above to give it space to breathe. There's just enough darkness at the bottom to know that this Ferris wheel is sitting behind a set of buildings. We can see the reflection of the sea out of there. So it's a rather nice crop. It's sitting off to the, and that rule of thirds off to one side gives it a little bit of space. Lovely shapes in that Ferris wheel. That's, those are the fact that we've got all the silhouette allows, these shapes allow for those kind of patterns to happen within the silhouettes themselves. So yeah, lovely shape. So thanks for sending that one in, Jim. Now, where are we? So yeah, Michelle said she preferred the blue one. And John says, by shutting off the comments and then turning back on, now allows for automatic comments update. Okay, right. So for those of you who've been having problems with the comments, try that one. So John's option there of turn the comments off and then back on, and hopefully they will carry on updating automatically. So thanks for that one, John. VG says the contrast is good. Doriana says she likes the blue background too. John loves the blue background. Russ says, I love this shot. The light catching the top of the Ferris wheel works really well, with a slight hint of pink to the right is interesting. Okay, and Jim's saying thanks. So, cool. Glad that one's worked. Right, okay. So, where are we next? I think we'll move on to Kazia. Okay, so Kazia. Now, this one, Kazia says, good morning. Not sure if it isn't too late. No, it's fine. You got it in time. I thought I'd give it a go. My submission for this month's Silhouette Challenge. Sunset light on the streets of Bristol. I like the reflection on the glass tiles of the buildings. If I could ask for your opinion and views on it. So yeah, so what we've got is again that kind of blue hour, that just post sunset, brilliant glow in the sky, and it's catching on the reflections of the window, the great big glass sides of the buildings there, which is rather nice. Interestingly, then the colours of the sky also seem to be echoed in things like the writing on the signs. There's little bits of reflection over here as well. What looks like, shop lights, car lights. We've all got these kind of reds and oranges. Now, the only thing I would really say with this, Kazia, is I think that it's, whilst say these traffic lights are silhouetted, a lot of it isn't as much as it could be. So I would be tempted to just darken the darks again with this. So if we again open this in Photoshop, I don't think it needs a lot, but quite simply if we do something like, let's get the levels again, take the slider on the left and drag it down a bit. Now maybe that over creates too much happening with the sky there, so perhaps another option then is what we do is we mask this. So if I'll just do a very loose mask here where we'll select the buildings and this tree, and that should probably do it. And in fact what I might do, yeah, so we've got that, and now if I create a levels and I drag this down, you can see it's only dragging down the darker parts of that. And I think you come down to here, maybe we shouldn't have got too much of this, the reflections in the building. So I'll just, okay, let's do a softer thing here, bring back a little bit of colour into that. There, just get something like that. But I think that idea here, that you're just kind of darkening down the foreground, really, or darkening down, and then that allows, so these buildings here are no longer catching the eye, because it's not, if you're talking about the silhouette, it's the shapes against the sky, not you're not wanting the texture within it. We've maybe still got some of these sort of bits of colour within, but I think that's kind of okay. I think that's all right, because we know then that is part of the city and the traffic and what have you. Because the real story here is this glorious colour, but also the glorious colour reflected in these buildings here. So really, I think something as basically as fairly simple as that makes a difference. So I hope that helps, Kazia. Right. Okay. Where are we? So a couple more comments, and where are we? Right. So Michelle says, love the colour reflection. Vici says, the colour in the sky looks gorgeous. The signal is a bit intruding. Russ says, the edit really draws your attention to the drama of the sunset. Yeah, it's about, yes, it is, but it is about that understanding, again, where the story is. So Kazia says, yes, that way looked much better, and the emphasis of the silhouette on the buildings. Thank you. Good. I'm glad that worked. Right. Okay. Next up then, we have Meg. So my daughter, Meg, who is, and she doesn't have a Facebook account, so she isn't involved in the comments and what have you, and she doesn't usually take part. But every now and again, when there's a challenge coming up, she will ask me. And she said to me, after watching last week's, that she had a picture she thought she might want to put in of a tree silhouetted. So I said, well, okay, send it over. And this was the picture. And I think it's rather a glorious tree. I think it works well. Of course, I'm absolutely biased, being her father. But there is a beautiful shape of it, I think, against the sky. The only thing I tend to feel with this is the crop. Now, this was taken on Meg's phone, and I tend to feel I would like a sort of slightly wider crop on this for the most part. Again, if I just open this in Photoshop, because I can't actually, I'll tell you what, let's just close a couple of these before everything gets to before my computer starts using up too much energy on too many other things. Right, so having closed that, we've got this picture. I'll just pull this down to, I think there's a couple of different ways you could do this. This crop feels, I think, like I want a bit more room to it. And if now, it's not really, I don't think you ideally want to be playing around with the editing software on this, but something as simple as standing a little bit further back. And if I do content aware fill, it's not going to give a perfect fill, but it will give us a sense of space. And again, let's kind of maybe do a little bit here to just kind of darken down a little bit, something like that. So it's not detracting attention. But here you see, I think if we go from that to that, you can see it gives that tree that little bit more space there, and it allows room to breathe. And so, but in order to do that, Meg, I think you just needed to step back a little bit more. And it's going back to that idea of very often you're better off, whatever you're taking a photo of, step back a little bit and take more of it than you think you need, because it's easier to crop in than it is to add on afterwards. So if you've got a larger photo, you can crop into the size that you want. Whereas if you're too close in to begin with, then you're kind of a bit stuck. The other option for this is to make it more of a portrait shot, and where essentially we would crop it where we drag in the sides, something like this. And then if you do something like that, then what that does is it emphasizes that notion of the height. It's all about that looking up and seeing the huge impressive sense of the size of the tree dominating the picture, and it allows us to really make the most of that silhouette and those fantastic shapes that are coming off the branches. So that's my suggestion, Meg, is about the crop. But thank you for sending that one in, that's lovely. Right, okay, and we've got John says, nice tree silhouette shot. Russ says the slight adjustment makes a difference to the feel of the shot as well. Cool, okay. Right, where are we at now then? John said, so this was a studio shot John did. Said a small group of photographers, 4 friends, who are in a small group, had a meetup, got together and organised this shoot. It was so because I asked him about, he put in the shot and I asked him about it, and he said, so the idea was the group leader. So the lights were behind a translucent sheet, the models were in front, and the setup was fairly easy, and he played around with different poses. So I mean, I think that's, that's fun. So we got the light behind the sheet, and then that allows you to play with the shape. You've got the models, they can play with our shapes, and you can, again, I might be tempted with this, because the sheet still has quite a bit of texture on it, to essentially do the same thing like we did with some of the others, where we take the levels and just tweak them, maybe bring up the lights a bit more, something like that. I think then stops us worrying too much about the sheet itself, and then maybe just nudge down the blacks a little bit so that we don't get too much detail coming out. But something as simple and as straightforward as that, I think maybe emphasizes it a little bit more. But I think the one of the fun things to understand with this actually is get a few of you together. Certainly, if you've got a few friends, all chip in together, hire a model, hire a studio, and you can, what might otherwise have been a bit too expensive to do on your own, when split between 4 of you or 6 of you. Obviously, I suppose we need to be kind of slightly more post-COVID if we're going to do this kind of thing. But I think there's a lot of fun to be had in getting a small group of you together to play around and really explore what you can do with your photography, with models, or a studio setting. So thanks for sending that in, John. Right, where am I? Okay, oh, right, I'm now on the wrong page again. So, where are we? Oh, okay, right, and Jackie also said she preferred the. Oh, where are we? Oh, yeah, so it's with regard to Meg's silhouette tree shot, Robert says, great shot, Meg. Roy says, the portrait version is a strong composition. Rosie says, lovely tree silhouette, Meg. Jackie also says she prefers the portrait crop. There. Okay, so then on to John's shot. Kazia says that's an amazing shot. VG says this silhouette shot and Jackie's are both very good, professionalism to the core. Cool, right. So where are we now then? Oh, Michelle, that's where I was going next, was Michelle's picture. So let's flip over to here, and Michelle says, this was taken while out for a walk late one night to a church on a hill in South Gloucestershire called St Arilda's Church, looking over towards the Severn Bridge and Wales. So the bridge you can see in the background here is the Severn Bridge, which links England and England and Wales are linked further up, but this is down on the southern part of Wales, links across the River Severn. And she says, I love how the sun is going down, leaving a white rim light. I have a couple of photos of that view, but I like this one because of the tree. So yeah, there's a lot. This is where you're using silhouette as for creating patterns and textures and layers and levels. And there's a lot going on in here. So the main point of focus is that, the bridge is nice and sharp. We've got the fantastic clouds, you say, the little bit of sun just catching on there, creating this lovely rim of light and texture in the clouds. With the tree in the foreground isn't in focus, but that doesn't really matter quite so much. It's about the framing that we're getting with it. These lovely diagonals, and we've got a kind of frame within the frame. So there's layers, there's the sky, there's the clouds, there's the tree, there's the river, and then we've got the bridge, and then the river, and then the trees. And then there's another little layer here, which is reflections in what might be a little bit of wet walkway or something as well. So I do like that. There's a much going on, and it also emphasises why these kind of the sunset or golden hour or even the blue hour is such a good time for doing silhouette photography, because it allows for all these sort of extra layers, because the subjects might be black, you're not making out any detail, then the background becomes much more important. And in this case, in a lot of ways, the background itself becomes the subject, and the silhouette is being used to create interesting shapes and patterns throughout it. So thanks for sending that one in, Michelle. Right, and the next one comes from Nuria, and Nuria had also sent in two pictures, I think. I asked her to choose one. She then decided that one of the ones she sent in was that it hadn't been kind of cropped properly. So I said, well, that's okay, send it in again. She'd also done a colour shift on it, which she decided to take out, and we ended up with this one. Nuria says, this is the edited version. Apart from straightening it, I also decided to crop it and change the colour. So very dark and moody, this one. I think the other one was more brightly coloured than this. That kind of brown look to it, that's almost sepia, really adds a kind of much darker sense to it again. I mean, the cross itself then becomes quite gothic. Lovely shape of the what we've got here with the fence coming along, and then interesting couple of people there, and I love the fact that you can see the dog on the lead as well. Lots of kind of fun texture here. The bowed head, could just be in conversation, but maybe it has a slightly different feel when you've got it up against quite a large cross here. The only thing I would say is, once again, I tend to feel like there's just a little bit too much space underneath. It also feels like it could be tilted just a fraction more. That cross feels like maybe it's my screen, but it does feel like it's leaning to the left a little bit. So if I just take this and I just tilt that a little bit like that, and then maybe I can say bring up. I don't think you need quite as much from the bottom. I can see that what you've essentially done is like using the rule of thirds on that horizontal line there, except for the fact that I think it's giving too much space. And I think if you took the thirds up to here, where you've got, you know, this part of the thing, and then it crosses through these people and the dog. And in fact, actually, maybe if we pull that over a little bit more, then this bottom corner, this where that intersection is, if you're doing a rule of thirds thing there, sort of intersects with the people. And there, I think it makes it a sort of slightly more interesting crop, because you're not wasting that sort of sense of space at the bottom. Maybe, is there too much space over on the left, or do we find maybe you could kind of bring it in a little bit, down a bit. That contains it more, for sure. At the same time, there's something I quite like about the space over on the left as well. I think because it's it's a very still photo. This cross just dominant is then sitting smack bang in the middle, but it's these people and the dog just off to the right, which really add the human element to it. And then that sense of space over on the left gives more that sense of emptiness. And with the darker colours you've gone, it's a very kind of melancholic mood and feel for the photo. But I do think that crop, I do think that sort of getting rid of that extra amount of space on the bottom helps to emphasize that story a bit. Again, just to go back to show you what you had got, I think there's just a bit too much black down here, and just straightening it slightly and cropping in like that helps emphasize that narrative a little bit more. Great. Okay, where are we? So boom, 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 boom. Okay, so VG says, beautiful shot, a dark theme, lovely. Ross says, great atmosphere to the shot. Jackie says she prefers the edit. Ross says, I like the crop, but did like the light on the ground that was cropped out. And where else are we? Right, sorry. Comments are leaping up and down. VG says, looks like a postcard, perfect. Nuria says, would it be better if she got rid of the sign? I don't know, I quite like that sign. I think it's a little bit of extra there. I think it sort of allows for the space on the other side. Oh, April's here, says, hi everyone. Starting June the 29th, I will be able to watch the whole episode live. School is almost out. Yay! Brilliant, April. So not too long now, then. Just another week or two, and you can start watching from the beginning. VG agrees that actually she thinks it's fine having the sign in there. Cool. Right. Okay. So next up, then, we will go with Robert. Yes. So Robert, yes, you can come back now. I realise I've got your text in a different place in my notes over here, which is what confused me. So I really like this one from Robert. So Robert has sent in, says, here is my silhouette photo for this week's podcast. I was working in Washington, D.C., and there was a partial solar eclipse on Monday morning at 6:38 a.m. Unfortunately, it was obscured by clouds. It did add an interesting light to the background. The original was a little askew due to the handheld position. I had a tripod, but was told by the park police that you cannot use them on monuments. I never knew that. Maybe it varies. Well, mind you, I don't know how often I've tried using a tripod on monuments. But it took me a moment to sort of realise. But then you said this photo was taken from the Lincoln Memorial. So that's at the other end of this, looking back. And there were several other photographers there doing exactly the same as me. In post-processing, I realigned the orientation, so straightened it up, and moved the S-curve to darken the shadows. So essentially what Robert did here, a bit like I did for Kazia's photo and for Doriana's photo, which was by darkening it down, you sort of darken in the silhouettes, but it also darkens and creates a little bit more contrast in the sky as well. So that sky looks really textured and rich. And I think you're absolutely right here. It's a fantastic spot to get those reflections on in the water. So to get the obelisk, the forgotten the word of it. Anyway, to get that nice straight reflected and those beautiful reflections of the colours in the water, and even the reflection of the trees and tops of the trees, kind of nice and fuzzy just there as well, I think is a really good shot. Shame you weren't able to get the eclipse. They're hard at the best of times. Interested for anybody who happens to be interested, I'll just show you the photo that I used to promote these podcasts, which was this one. This was taken during a partial eclipse back in 2015, I think it was. So that is the moon covering the sun up there. We didn't get the full eclipse. It was slightly further. We did get a little bit more than that, but I think this was just as it was sort of starting to disappear past. And I remember this was my first time trying to photograph an eclipse, and I set up and I got my cam on a tripod and all this, and I'd got some filters because pointing the camera directly at the sun. Only then turned out to be a really cloudy, overcast day. But then there was enough light coming through so you could see that there's this really textured sky. I took photos of it and then realised all it was like a sliver in the sky and there wasn't really much happening. And I suddenly realised I needed it offset against something to give it. And I then noticed the crows or the jackdaws are flying around the chimney. So I quickly rearranged my setup so that I could get both the chimney and the crows and the eclipse happening in the same bit of the shot. But it hadn't occurred to me that you needed something else to reference it until I was there. So live and learn with that. But yes, if you're there and suddenly you can't get the eclipse you want, certainly I think that's a beautiful kind of, again, blue hour shot just before sunrise. So thanks for sending that one in. Really nice silhouette. I think it's a good use of silhouette, that. Right. So where are we? Oh, Stacey says, I am watching. I've been busy, but I'm seeing all the photographs. I am learning about silhouettes. I was trying to time it, but did not get the chance. And where are we? So VG says, the skies, reflections, loving it. Robert says, the police said that it was a new policy, only about 2 weeks old. God, is that weird? You can't help but feel when somebody comes up and says, oh no, that's illegal. Oh, how long has this been illegal? Oh, just 2 weeks. You almost feel like they're making it up on the spot, but I suppose if it's the police, you can't really challenge them. You don't want to sort of end up handcuffed or, sent off somewhere. But yeah, that's a strange one though. Why would you just have, suddenly you're not allowed to use a tripod there for 2 weeks? It's quite bizarre. Anyway, I'm not going to try and solve that one. Rosie says, lovely shot, Robert. Robert says, I was hoping to get smug points for having silhouette of them. Smug points, my apologies. I've been missing out on the smug points. Yes, certainly everybody so far. I think if you've submitted something, allow yourself a smug point. I should have been dishing out a few more smug points here already. Certainly, I think extra smug points. I love Inga's use of you turning the picture into a silhouette with a squirrel and getting the lovely fluffy ears showing up and the texture on the tree. I think Jackie should get some smug points for playing around with a lovely shape with the hat and the arms. Jim's certainly getting his smug points. Actually, yeah, this is the tricky bit here, really. Pretty much everybody gets smug points. I look at them all and yeah. So this is it. I'm just going back and repeating what we've been talking about all the way along so far. So yes, smug points all around. My apologies, I should have been got in with them earlier. However, you didn't get the silhouette of the moon. Naria says she also loves the reflections of the colours in the sky. Robert says he likes my eclipse and enjoys the story and the gothic sense of it. Ben says that works nicely with the birds. Looks as if they're reacting to the eclipse. John says, great photo, Robert. April is saying, this is a good Halloween silhouette. Michelle really likes seeing the birds in the photo. Jim says, nice shot, Robert. Robert says, I suppose the tripod policy is due to crowds. Oh, okay, yeah, I suppose that makes sense. John says, tripods are discouraged in crowded areas, museums, churches and the like. So I guess there's a problem of people tripping over it, and then who's responsible if anybody decides to sue anyone. Rosie says, we have a similar policy in museums and places of worship. Didn't realise that. Okay. Maggie says, smug points for all. Hooray. Yeah, I'm just going to have to sort of set up some kind of little sticker on top of my... When I'm doing a challenge, I think I need to stick a sticker on my computer screen that says, and don't forget the smug points. Right, where are we then? So, Rosie next. Yeah. Scroll down here. And so, yes, let's flip over to here. So Rosie says, you should have seen me sprinting up the road to get the sunset shot. It was just by chance I popped out of my front door to investigate the glow on the house opposite. So you glanced out the windows, noticed the house opposite was glowing, and then realised that it would probably be a good sunset there. Brilliant. Grabbed the camera and ran. Superb. Normally I don't like pylons and wires and spend hours photoshopping them out. However, on this occasion I enjoyed the short time I had trying different angles with the sun and the struts of the electricity pylons, all the time being watched by a curious herd of cows. Superb. Yeah, no, I think that is interesting. I've somewhere I have a photo of similar colour sky, although it was a sort of break on the horizon where it had been raining, so it was sort of darker clouds and telegraph pylons sort of moving across the hill on the distance. But in the end, I no matter how many different ways I tried to edit it, it never really reflected the sense, the feeling that I had at the time, because everything was too far away and too small, and I couldn't get the balance with it. But yes, get it right here. What you're doing, instead of, unlike my one where I had them all running across the hill on the horizon, what you've done rather beautifully is use that sense of perspective going into the photo. So we're now looking down the length of it, and we've got these wonderful. So we've got the telegraph pylons, and they're running, creating this lovely diagonal and perspective shot heading down, and then taking that sun and placing it directly between just draws all the attention into this place, and then it's all about the shapes. And this is silhouette at its best. It's what you try, where you've got that really dramatic sky, you've got the wonderful colour, wonderful texture, but we've got all the textures of, but it becomes that, even though it's a rural area and it's not a heavily industrialized area, there is such an urban photo. So we've got these man-made poles, these man-made electricity bits, and then I like the fence here. The fact that we've got the sort of bits of silhouette of the fence there as well, kind of echo that. And then we've got a little house rooftop there, and a bit of gate over on the left as well. So the lines of the clouds all being very strongly horizontal, but the posts being very vertical, but the diagonal that's coming from the wires and from the sensor perspective just sort of draw your eye down there. So lovely shot, Rosie. Smug points, I think, well deserved. So thank you for sending that one in. Right. Okay, Jim says, lovely picture of a three-phase transformer. Superb. Okay, yep, that's the kind of knowledge I have no idea about. So yeah, somebody recognises that electricity pylons. So just brilliant. Nuria says, wish I could have seen you running, Rosie. Love the fact that you got the sun right between the pylons. Russ says, great leading lines there. April says, I can picture this photo in a movie scene. It does have that kind of cinematic feel to it, doesn't it? And VG says, not to forget the cows. Wish we could have seen them as well. John says, Buckeye points for my Ohio for Rosie. Brilliant. Okay, so let's move on then to our next photo, which is from Roy. So Roy sent this one in, says, I didn't have any silhouette images, so I had to go out and take one. I love that, Roy. I love the idea that rather than go raid the archives, which we all have to do sometimes, that's not a problem, but the fact that you didn't and you went out and actually created this specifically for the challenge, extra smug points for that, I think. So I found the challenge both technically and artistically challenging. I waited for the figure to give a sense of scale. I also think it improves the composition. And I like that as well. And I think there was a bit in the comment, when you put this in a few days ago, I remember Cliff left a comment saying it's one of those things that very often we're out there taking photo and then somebody wanders into shot and actually we end up either waiting for them to move out or cloning them out because they kind of spoil the composition a bit. But in this case, I think you're absolutely right to do so, Roy, that having that little figure here, over on the right, just really gives you that sense of the height and the scale of that tower. Otherwise, on its own, it's more difficult to know because we've got this. There's a word for it which has gone completely out of my head, but for where you pile up the wood and set fire to it so that it can glow, and it's a sort of signal fire kind of thing. Because we've got this in the foreground there, this I presume is probably about 3 or 4 meters high. But whilst it's a nice thing to have in the foreground, I think it does mean that it makes it slightly harder to get a sense of scale of this in the background. So getting the person in there really does make the difference. The only thing I would say is, you see, there's not something quite with the crop here. If it's not quite square, but it's not quite landscape. And I think you either square it up a bit, in which case you maybe need a little bit more room off to the left, or you landscape it a little bit more. There does feel that this bit on the left here feels a little bit nudged up to the side of the photo a little bit more. And again, just want a little bit more space on that. But if you take that again, it's about trying to find the balance of, you can adjust one part. How does it work? So in that sense, again, maybe it would be interesting to see a further pulled out shot, and then a bit like Meg's tree, you could either kind of make it sort of more landscape, or you crop it in maybe a little bit more square, and sort of play with your rule of thirds, I think, with this, so that you've got a sort of sense of balance within it, I think, because you've got such very strong verticals and counteracting the strong horizontal of the horizon, that sense of balance becomes quite important. So slightly different crop on that, I think, but it's a nice tower to get to, nice silhouette shapes there, and certainly I think the figure there was a good addition. So thanks for sending that one in, Roy. Right, what have we got here? VG says is it a lighthouse? No, I think it's just a castle tower. Oh, Russ, beacon. Yes, that was the word. Thank you, Russ. Stick the fire in, set fire to it. It's a beacon, so that people further down the coast can also see it. And it was a way of letting people know that, say, like, whether the shores of Britain were being invaded, that somebody could light the beacon, somebody at much further distance could light theirs, and you could send the message across the country quite quickly doing it that way. Robert says, is this where they filmed Highlander? No, I think they filmed most of that in Ireland, actually, and bits of Scotland. Where are we? Rosie also says, is that a beacon? Ben says square crop without the beacon on the left. Then there's a diagonal of a cloud tower and person. That's one way to play with. Roy says, no, it's Victoria Tower on Castle Hill near Huddersfield. Huddersfield being, down in England, really. Russ says, smug points, question mark, question mark, question mark. Does that mean you're not sure what smug points are? It was something I introduced a little while back with when I first started doing the challenges, really. Just a bit of fun, really, of let's have a smug moment. Just a moment to kind of feel good about what you've achieved. and so smug points just seemed like a good fun thing to sort of dole out. Okay, so VG says, yes, tiny person is what makes the photo more interesting. Cool. Right, okay, actually then up next to Russ. And Russ has sent in this photo. And Russ says, this shot I took of my eldest a few years ago. He often used to ask me to take photos of him, so I decided to try something different and placed him directly between the camera and a studio light in a softbox. I was quite pleased with the result. I like the detail of the hair and the beard, and even though it's a silhouette, I still think you get a sense of thoughtful contemplation from the position of the head. And yes, I think you're right there. This is a classic facial silhouette where silhouettes before photography, in Victorian times, you could quite often get little cutouts, or where, the silhouette of a person, the hair and the hat, or the collar, head and shoulders were actually done in as lockets, little artworks. And this kind of taps into that kind of same classic mold. And when and softbox is quite a good way of doing it. If you've got a large white softbox, you just place it behind, so all the light is coming from behind. And yeah, you've just got the detail, and it is in that classic sense. We can't see the detail of the face. We are desperately trying to read it to sort of get a sense of it. So we're filling in the details, and the fact that the head is tilted forward does make it feel that bit more contemplative. And and the nice little texture on the hair, as you say, the texture on the beard. I think that's fun. Now, interestingly, this is the second version Russ put in. The first version Russ put in was cropped in much closer. It's more kind of traditional portrait crop. And then he said, as I sat looking at my original offering, I could almost hear Kim's disembodied voice in my head saying, give it room to breathe. So here it is, not a second image, but rather a revised version of the first one. So it seems that certain phrases that I come up with a lot are actually working their way into people's minds. Well, that's got to be a good thing. A slightly creepy thing, slightly worrying thing, but actually I think it's a good thing if you can start taking these ideas on board. I seem to remember a few months back, Maggie and I were talking about the fact that, of course, there are certain phrases that crop up an awful lot, and she seemed to reckon it was only a matter of time before somebody comes up with the drinking game and says every time you say give it room to breathe, they'll be downing another shot, or straighten that horizon, or any one of a number of other very common things I'm prone to say. So thanks for sending that one in, Russ. Smug points for taking on board what I was saying. Russ says, oh, right, no, should he be getting smug points for telling me it was a beacon? Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, okay, yeah, why not? Have a smug point for getting past my appalling memory. Vandana says, very interesting one, so she likes your picture there, Russ. VG says, now everyone thinking about room to breathe. Great profile shot. Rosie says, lovely profile shot. I wish my sons had asked me to take that photograph when they were younger instead of running away or turning round. They're more amenable now. Yeah, it does kind of vary. My daughter Meg is still very good for allowing me to take her photo. My son Rogan got fed up at a much younger age of just me pointing the camera at him, got way too self-conscious about it. Stacey says, I use that phrase, it actually works. And Rosie says, I like the idea of a drinking game. VG says, tough to make my son to get my son to pose. And Russ is happy with getting his smug point. Cool, excellent. So what else have we got here? Next up then, we have Sophie. And Sophie sent two different photos. Again, asked me to choose. And I asked her in turn to choose which one she wanted to go for, and this was the one she wanted. So it was taken in the first morning, the second at sunset time. The first one was taken in the morning with a backlight, and this is a silhouette of an ibis. What's quite fun about this is you've got the texture of all the water there, and with the light behind it, you're just getting a little bit of edge light around it, and I really quite like the droplets of water that are also just kind of coming off the beak, and the little disturbance in the water. Lovely shape of the sort of reflection of the silhouette underneath it as well. It feels fairly centered. I'm almost tempted, a bit like Cliff's seagull earlier, and I remember we had a bird and he decided not to go for the center but sort of slightly to the right of the picture, so to allow a little bit more space to the left. I think that might work a little bit better. I could be wrong on this, but I've not tried this one already, so let's take a little look. So again, if I do this and let's shift that sideways, we'll use the content aware fill just to see what difference that makes. And at that point, I think I'm also slightly tempted to bring this up a little bit as well. Got to be careful, we don't want to lose the silhouette of the reflection of the silhouette, but I think we can maybe bring it up to about here. That's interesting. I could maybe take it up a little bit further as well. You can just give it a little bit more space at the top. So essentially what we're doing is we're creating a little bit more of a kind of rule of thirds rather than central with it. Does that work better? Maybe. Again, there's probably a personal taste in this. I think I prefer it slightly, although maybe I don't know. More space to the left here, but there's not a lot in it. Maybe we are better off with the original where you've got all the details happening within it. Interesting. Okay. I think I'll maybe play around with it a little bit. Could you take a square crop of it? Maybe that would give it a little slightly more, something like that perhaps. So that way we've still got all the, we want to make sure we don't lose the droplets or this nice kind of circular part around the ibis. That's also a kind of interesting one. So yeah, certainly one to play with, I think, Sophie. But I like the details that are coming out. I like the gap in the bill as well of the bird. So yeah, fun one that. Thank you for sending that one through. Okay, let's just close a couple more of these down. So, and that one, right? Okay, where are we? And okay, so Rosie says, beautiful ibis, I love the droplets off the beak. April says, you have the reflection silhouette too, I like that. VG says, yes, such clarity. And the water looks like a painting. Jackie is enjoying the texture and the colour involved. Ben prefers the new crop. April likes the new crop and sees the difference. Russ prefers the crop. And Jim says the space to the left gives it more room for the bird to move into. Right. Cool. Okay, excellent. Right, let's move on then. So just a couple more left. And where are we? Right, Vandana. So Vandana sent this one in. I tried my hand at my first silhouette. Went to the plaque, clicked at least 10 pictures, and this one had it. I hope I got something right. So I love that, Vandana, the idea that you've not done silhouettes before, so you're going to go out and try and find one. So that I love. I love the fact that you've done that. So smug points for doing that for sure. And then, so what's interesting here is, unlike the usual kind of thing where you would have a strong backlight, whether it's a studio light or a sky or something like that, the background is actually just the grass and the park itself. And you manage that because it looks like you're standing in the shade of the tree. And so you've got the darkness of the tree and the shadow. So your camera has adjusted to the light of the grass, which in turn has made the figures darker. So I think that's a fun way of doing it. I do tend to feel it's kind of really probably too much black there. And there's also is that sort of slight sense of wanting to straighten it again. So just along with giving it room to breathe, I think straighten the horizon. Straightening it a bit, I think, helps. And then if you remember one of these things we've been talking about on a couple of things, and even with the ibis just now, is about that if you've got figures moving in a direction, you're almost better off having the more space in front of them rather than behind. So at that point, I would be tempted to sort of move these figures over to the right, and hopefully the content fill here will give us a bit more sense of, yeah, so something like that I think automatically makes it a little bit more, gives them space around. Another option here is to come in and actually make it a bit more landscape. And again, and for this, again, what you would have had to have done this when you took the photo. But to only have part of the darkness of the leaves hanging down and part of the darkness of the shadow in the foreground, but allow the space for them to sort of move into it. Like that. And can you see the difference there, Vandana? That when you have this, it's dominated by the darkness of the tree above and the shadow below, and they're already most of the way out of the picture. But by cropping in here and giving them space to the left, they've now got space to walk through the picture. The darkness of the tree hanging down here and the shadow in the foreground is enough to frame it, but without dominating. So it's coming back to that notion of where's the story, and the real story of this is the couple walking through the lighter background, the textured park grasses, but in silhouette. So when you've got if that's where the story is, when the trees are so much the silhouette, then that's detracting away from the story. So cropping in helps that, and giving them space to move into helps it more. So if you were to go back and do something similar again, turn your camera into a landscape position and just try and get just enough foliage coming down from above and the shadow below, and try and create something slightly more kind of cinematic again, I suppose, out of it. But thank you for sending that one in, and absolute kudos and smug points to you for going out and trying to get your first silhouette. Really good, really good. Okay, what have we got next? Right. Okay. So where were we? Oh, Vandana says, thank you. April says, would like to see it better with landscape mode. I think that's probably just before I did it. Vandana says that one definitely looks better. Oh, and April says she does love the landscape version. Roy says the landscape crop works well. VG likes the landscape is good. Vandana, nice location. Colours add much charm to the photo. Inga's arrived, says, sorry I couldn't join earlier. Have to catch up and watch the podcast tomorrow. Yeah, we talked about you've got smug points for your squirrel, so you can always find that, Inga. Vandana says, thank you, we'll try another one. And Ross says the crop works really well on that one. Cool. Right. Okay. So, quick reminder, if you're finding these podcasts useful or interesting, invite your friends. Try and drag a few more people along. Let's try and build this community of ours. Here we are, we're looking through all these photos, getting inspired by what other people are doing, thinking, this is fun, what could I do, how could I change this? And if you're kind of getting excited by this, we want more people to come in and enjoy this. So if you know of anybody else who you think would enjoy these podcasts, do let them know. Excellent. Oh, right. I think Inga's just sort of seen the bit that says I've given her smug points for the squirrel. So hooray, she says. Cool. Okay, so last photo then we're moving on to is VG. So VG's been playing with a chessboard. And so VG says, backlit a chessboard and took this shot. Covered the light with a red polythene bag to get the red background. It was fun spending time to take the photo and also experimenting with them with different colours and hues while editing. Yet I felt the original coloured background is what I liked, and hence posting this. I'd be pleased to receive your views on them, and for our friends who'd be interested to give their views and suggestions. So, like when we talked about doing the Still Life challenge a few months back, chessboards are a great thing to sort of play around with. They're not going anywhere. You can arrange them. You can get down close. You can look from above. And in this case, VG's got this hand-carved chess set. And what I like about this is the layers and the levels. You could just have the knight on its own, but having the pawns running down the side give that sense of depth and movement, and especially as they kind of go out of focus as well. But if you think about that photo of Rosie's, where she had the telegraph pylons disappearing into the scene, you've got that same kind of thing. When you see these things getting smaller into the distance, you get that sense of depth. The light behind then is silhouetting the things in the foreground, the subjects in the foreground. Now, in this case, we've got edge lighting kind of becoming quite prominent with it as well. In some ways, it's as much a backlighting photo, this, as silhouette, which of course silhouettes usually are backlighting as well. But I think the fact that we're getting more detail on the edging, but I think it's really moody. I like that because you've got a very narrow depth of field, and you can see this down here. If we look at where the detail is we've, there's only a probably half a centimetre or so, which is actually in focus. So it allows the edge of sort of the pawn either side of the knight is in focus, the knight itself is in focus, and then all the other pawns and the board itself disappear out of focus as it goes back. Interestingly, with the colour, VG's used the colour with the red polythene, but you could, if you wanted, with a simple hue saturation thing, change the colour. Now, if you've got another different colour polythene bag, you can certainly do that. But if just by using the hue saturation tool, if I take the hue tool and I just drag it off slightly, you can see how it changes. And then you can go into the greens or the blues, and the blues, totally different feel, very cool kind of feel to it. And in fact, if we carry on with the blues here and then start moving into the indigos and maybe into the purples as well, it's got a totally different feel to it again. So I think that's always a kind of fun part of colour. When you're sort of essentially playing with a single colour, be it red or any of the others, then it gives you the chance to just grab the hue tool, hue and saturation, and drag it around and play with it, and to sort of see whether, your original red was that, nudge it slightly to the left and you end up with that sort of slightly deeper red. And just before you start moving into the pinks and magentas, before you get into the purple and then the blues. So yeah, nicely composed shot. Lots of your sense of the technicalities of these VG have really come on from where you've been. I think you've got that nice sense of depth out of the photo. So yeah, smug points all round, I think. Right. Okay. Well, thank you for sending that one in. We've got a few comments on that, where Stacey says very nice, Vandana says love it VG, April says very good chess silhouette, Jackie says excellent, Rosie says love the depth of field VG. April says I find it interesting you chose the colour red as a background. Did you play with other colours? I presume that's probably just before I started playing with the other colours. Russ says lovely photo, great depth of field and texture. Naria says love it VG, love the depth of field. Robert says incredible shot. Jim says lovely photo VG, like the knight as the main character. Roy says think this would work well in black and white too. I'm pretty certain it would. VG says yes, tried many colours, the purple and cyan looked cool as well. And then VG's thanking everyone, and April says she likes the purple one as well. So that's us. That pretty much brings us to the end of this podcast. Thank you to everyone who sent in their images, certainly smug points all round. Thank you to everybody who's commented as well and taken the time to watch this evening. Next week, back to a more standard week where we will be. I'm not decided on exactly which photos I'm going to talk about yet, but certainly we will be having the critique section. So this is your chance. Go out, take your photos, or dig through your archives, find the photos that where you're having sticking problems, you want some feedback. let me know. Send me your images, send me your questions, and I will do my best to help. This is, after all, the place to help you improve your photography. So you don't always get the chance to ask a professional photographer the best way to sort of step forward. Here's your opportunity. So stick your photos into the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group. If you don't watch on Facebook but just watch the only watch on YouTube, then you can always email me your images. But make sure you let me know as well what your sticking point is, where you feel you're having difficulty with the picture, and what area of help you would like. And I will do my best to help you. Great. Okay. Right. Well, a bunch of people saying thank you and good night, and so that's brilliant. Really enjoyed having your company once again. Thank you to everyone for sending in and commenting, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care and enjoy. Good night.